I'll be honest, I kind of like answering questions for atheists, even though I think we all know it's a complete waste of time. Why? Because it shows that we do, in fact, have answers. Now, they're not answers that the religious are going to like. They're not answers that they're going to acknowledge. But we can answer them all, and our answers, at least I'd like to think, make total sense. Unlike theirs. Now, like I just said, I tend to enjoy answering questions from the religious, even though I know these questions are very rarely ever honest. Therefore, maybe love is a little bit overstated, because most of the time these questions aren't even intended for atheists to answer, because they don't really care what atheists have to say. They just want their biases confirmed, so they just fill in all the answers in their heads in a way that gets them where they're emotionally predisposed to go. And that's just dishonest, but still, hey, we persist and we try. Maybe someday they'll actually care. I don't know, maybe today is that day. We haven't really done this for a while. Sitting down just looking at a list of questions. We've done a few videos, but mostly it's been a while. And since these are supposed to be non-confrontational questions for atheists, I figure this is a pretty good place to get back into answering questions. And they say many people are interested in atheism, but they don't know how to broach the subject with atheists themselves. Answering questions is a great way to learn about atheism and how atheists view life, the world, and morality without feeling like you're being grilled. Here are some questions you can use to start a conversation with an atheist about atheism. Okay, fair enough. So let's get to it. How can you be sure that God doesn't exist? See, that's not really a good place to start. For the most part, and I can only answer for myself, atheists don't say that gods definitely don't exist. And you'll notice the presumption here is that only the Christian God counts, right? That is very, very common. Sadly, whoever wrote this thing has absolutely no clue what atheism is, and that's also very common as well. So here we go. Atheists, again, answering for myself, do not think that gods do not exist. We are simply not convinced that they do. We have not seen sufficient evidence to convince us that gods are even a thing. Any gods, and I'm not saying that there are no gods, I'm saying I don't find that to even be a coherent question. It's like asking if leprechauns exist. Well, not so far as I'm concerned, because I've seen no convincing evidence. I'm not saying that leprechauns definitely don't exist. I'm just saying you haven't proven it to me yet. Show me your evidence, and I might change my mind. What do you mean when you say you're an atheist? I don't believe in gods. That's it. I'd also be described as an leprechaunist because, as I just said, I don't believe in those either, or Bigfoot, or the Loch Ness Monster, or alien abductions. If you want a term that encompasses all of those, I'm a skeptic. I don't believe anything without evidence to back it up. I care about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I am not interested in how anybody feels or what anybody wants. I care only how they can justify their positions rationally and intellectually and back them up with objective evidence. And it's really kind of sad how poorly all of them fare. How did you arrive at your atheistic beliefs? I don't have any atheistic beliefs. There's no such thing. Here again, we see that the religious just don't understand what atheism is. Mostly, I figure that's on purpose. They assume, wrongly, that we're just like they are, and we are absolutely nothing of the sort. I reject your claims because your claims are not independently and objectively supported. That's it. That's all atheism is, at least as far as I'm concerned. It is not a worldview. It is not a belief system. It is the answer to a single question. Do you believe in any gods? My answer is no. Next. Do you think there's anything inherently wrong with believing in God. Well, not just with believing in God, but with any belief that relies on magical thinking and irrational thought patterns. Just because you're comforted believing in those things, that doesn't make those things true. And I know that's a scary thought for a lot of people, but too bad. This is what being an intelligent, rational, educated adult is like. It's sad just how many people absolutely refuse to do that. There comes a point in time when you just have to give up your imaginary friends and join the real world. And the religious don't want to do that, do they? Lots of people are the same way, sadly. People should not believe things without solid evidence. There just isn't any for any gods. There isn't any for a lot of things that people believe. So it's not just the religious who are being stupid. So yes, there is something inherently wrong with any adult who hasn't grown the hell up, no matter how sad that might make them feel. Maybe it's time for you to do something about it. Do you believe that believers are ignorant? Again, yes, I do. And I love how we put the "do you believe that believers" like it's going to put you in that camp, but we'll pass that by. Just because it makes you feel really, really good, that doesn't make that thing true. And it's not just the religious that are guilty of this. Modern society is full of people who embrace ideas that are complete and utter nonsense, unsupported by any kind of evidence of any kind, just because they get a dopamine shot in the noggin from it. Therefore, they just believe it anyhow. In my experience, virtually all theists of all religions, they are very ignorant about the real world. They believe because they want to believe, not because they have any good reason to think any of it is true. Their positions start and end at blind faith, and blind faith doesn't mean anything. Either a thing is true or it isn't. You figure out which of those two things is the case by looking at the evidence. How you feel about it doesn't matter. How do atheists deal with evil and suffering in the world? Well, the same way that we deal with waking up in the morning and feeling hungry. We just deal with it realistically. It is what it is. To quote Richard Dawkins, the universe that we observe has largely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. This is the world that we actually live in. Learn to deal with it. Again, your feelings have absolutely no impact on objective reality. Therefore, if we want to lessen suffering, which I think is a good thing, it takes going out and doing something about it. Talking to yourself and pretending there's a magical man in the sky, that doesn't do a damn thing. You've got to get up off your ass, get out there, and work. Because here's another thing, one that we see outside of religion as well. People are lazy. People don't want to make an effort. Whether it's getting on your knees and begging some imaginary man in the sky for help, or sitting behind a keyboard and whining online, none of those things actually make things better. It just makes you an idiot. Learn to deal with the world that you actually live in. If you want it to be better, go do something about it. The only way to fix things is to fix things, not to talk to yourself about it. Only one way is real, and that ain't it. Where do atheists get their moral compass if they don't believe in God? Well, the same place that everybody else does. Enlightened self-interest and empathy. That's how things actually work. It's just that the religious would rather staple God onto it rather than just deal with the actual reality. Again, this is just a very childish way to look at the world. Just because you really like the idea of a God, that doesn't make any gods real. Your wishes and your dreams don't matter. You don't get your morality from a magical wizard in the sky or a ridiculous big book of multiple choice called the Bible. You get it from your surroundings and your culture, just like everybody else. Stop pretending otherwise. Do atheists sometimes feel they're missing out because they don't believe in God? Now, I can only speak for myself, just like everything else, but for me, not remotely. Now, sure, there are some things in religion that can be useful. Community, a support system, all things that are baked into the whole church thing. But you don't need religion to have any of those things, do you? I've got all the friends that I want. I don't need anybody else. I have all the support that I need, and I don't have to hand over 10% of my income to get it. I don't have to shut off my brain on Sunday mornings just so I can feel like I belong. Religion is an easy source for that, but it's rapidly coming to an end. Religion is dying in the Western world, whether any theists like that or not. People don't need your make-believe solutions. Maybe it's time you just grew up. How would your life change if you believed in God? Well, my IQ would have to go down a good 50 points. The only way I'm ever going to believe in any gods again is if there is demonstrable, verifiable evidence that said gods are actually real. And I don't see that happening. Of course, I'll never say never, but it seems pointless to even consider the question knowing what I currently know. Come on back when you've got some of that evidence to present, because until then, it's just a pointless question. What do atheists believe happens after death? Nothing. Nothing at all. You're just dead. Everything that you ever were disappears and you just cease to exist. Welcome to the real world. Of course, this is why a lot of people are religious, because they are terrified to die. Therefore, they just make up comforting stories that they're going to some kind of magical paradise because it's a whole lot easier to handle if they think they're going to get rewarded once they drop dead. It's just that happens to be completely unsupported by any evidence whatsoever. So far as we can tell, if we care about the reality of the thing, that's just not going to happen. Your brain shuts off and you go, woof, and you're gone. That's it. Your fifis don't mean a damn thing. Grow up. Do you think religion is harmful to society? Absolutely. As I said before, all magical thinking is. Religion is just more insidious than the norm. Not only are the beliefs entirely unjustified and absurd, but they include a belief that some all-powerful authoritarian in the sky is going to punish you forever if it doesn't get its way. And that tends to lead to a lot of really, really bad decisions made on the part of the adherents. In fact, we have plenty of cases throughout history where not only do adherents do self-destructive things, think the 9/11 terrorist hijackers, but they don't care at all how many other people they hurt. You've got to keep your imaginary friend happy after all. Screw the rest of these people. This takes all kinds of forms. I run into Christians all the time who think that murdering infidels in the name of God is a really good thing. Or who figure that the planet doesn't matter since they're just going to get whisked away to a magical happy land in the sky, so who cares about pollution or toxic waste or overpopulation or anything else? This is just a place to wipe their feet on the way to eternity, right? So yes, religion is absolutely harmful to humanity. Now that doesn't mean that all theists are this crazy, although enough of them are to make it a concern. What do atheists think about religious art and architecture? Their art and architecture? The fact that they have religion attached doesn't make them any better or worse, and it certainly doesn't make the religion any more true. I'm not sure this is even a meaningful question. As far as I'm concerned, who cares? Have you ever been discriminated against because you're an atheist? Oh yeah, absolutely. Now I think I've told this story before someplace, I don't actually remember, but many years ago I had a Darwin fish on the back of my car. And I came out one morning to find that somebody had taken a pipe of some kind and punched a nice circular neat hole right through the back of my car, right over the Darwin fish. Theists tend to be assholes. Not all of them, of course, but enough that it poisons the entire idea and makes me down on blind belief because blind belief is stupid. There are tons of people out there who have been openly discriminated against because they are atheists. If you look around the world, there are tons of people who have been outright murdered because they are atheists. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of theists are just dicks. Are there any famous or well-known atheists I should know about? Really, honestly, who cares? I don't care about the people. I care about the ideas. I don't give a damn about Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or any of the rest, except that they express some good ideas. Likewise, I don't care about William Lane Craig or Frank Turek or any of the rest, except where they are expressing bad ideas. It's the ideas that matter, not the people. It just isn't the person who's up there standing on a stage that makes a difference. It's what they're saying and how their ideas accurately represent objective reality that does. And sadly for the religious, they're not very good at that, are they? Do you believe that humans are inherently good or bad? No? None of the above? Because good and bad as concepts are entirely subjective. Right and wrong as concepts are entirely subjective. The things that we tend to like, we call those things good, and the things that we don't like, we call those bad. So what? The problem is, a lot of people are just lazy. They desperately want someone else to tell them what to do. Some god, some authority figure, the government, whatever, they'll tell us what's right and what's wrong. We just have to believe. Except even if there was a God that said, well, here's what you should do, it's all still subjective from that God's perspective. In order to be objective, it has to be beyond everyone's opinion. Gravity is objective. It doesn't matter how you feel about it, it's still there. It's still 9.8 meters per second squared, no matter what you feel. So what I believe about anything subjective is entirely irrelevant, and that goes for you too. It's sad how many people just can't figure that out. How do you define morality, and what role does it play in your life? Well, didn't we just get done talking about that? Morality is entirely subjective. It's stuff that humans made up, and demonstrably it changes over time. What we see as moral today, a lot of it wasn't moral 50 years ago, and probably a lot of it that won't be moral either in another 50 years' time. People get really hung up on morality. It's, here's how I want the world to be, instead of, this is what the world actually is. That's not to say that you can't get together with a bunch of like-minded people and try to make the world a better place. By all means, do that, assuming that you're actually doing something useful. Just don't pretend that your ideas are the only ideas out there and that everyone has to do what you want them to do, or else. It's not going to work that way, and you're only going to get yourself into trouble and probably a big fight. Ultimately, this just turns into a giant dick-waving contest, and that doesn't help anyone. Be realistic in your moral assessments, because that's where most people fail. Do you think atheists can be moral people? Yeah, not only can we be, often we're a whole lot more moral than the religious. And we can go back to FBI prison entry statistics that shows that prison have far more religious people versus their numbers in overall society than atheists versus their numbers in overall society. We are not equally represented in the prison population. We're just not. Now, one reason why I think is that we tend to think for ourselves, while the religious, at least the most fundamentalist versions, they tend to do what it says in an ancient book of mythology. And this is a book that we can prove commenced slavery, genocide, racism, sexism, hatred of people for no reason other than they exist, violence against outgroups, etc., etc., etc. Then those people whine, well, why does everybody hate us? Because you're assholes, that's why. Religion isn't the get out of reality free card that a lot of theists seem to think that it is. But it's our religion. Yeah, but that's not a reason to be a prick. Knock it off. Do you think religion is harmful or helpful? Honestly, harmful. Anything potentially useful that you can get out of religion, any religion, you can also get without all the bad stuff somewhere else. The vast majority of what religion provides people is, but I really want to be happy. So what? It encourages people to remain immature and ignorant. And I'm not sure why that's supposed to be a good thing. What do you think is the meaning and purpose of life, if any? Well, there is no the meaning of life. You get to come up with your own. Nobody gets to impose one on you against your will. This is another childish authoritarian idea that is ridiculously rampant in religion. God gets to force you to do whatever he wants, and if you refuse, you fry for all eternity. Do you understand just how stupid that sounds? I get to choose what I want to do with my life within the social confines of the culture in which I live. I couldn't decide to be a serial killer, for instance. I mean, I guess I could, but I don't think I'd get very far in achieving my goals. They'd take me out and string me up, and they should. This is where religion, I think, has problems because a lot of religious people are absolutely terrified of reality. It's why they want an imaginary father figure in the sky to watch over them all the time and tell them what to do. They are not capable of making any decisions for themselves, which is why you hear so many of them saying, well, God gave me a wife, and God got me a job. I'm going to pray for a new car. Yeah, you don't pray for these things. You go out and you earn them. I want God to tell me what color car to buy. What are you, stupid? How do you deal with doubt or moments when you question your beliefs? First off, I want to correct the constant misconception that I see going on here. Atheism still isn't a belief system. Now, sure, I do have beliefs, but atheism has absolutely nothing at all to do with any of them. Atheism still isn't a religion. Atheism is just the answer to a single question. Figure it out and stop with all this crap. So I don't ever question my atheism because my atheism isn't a belief. It's a lack of a belief. I lack a belief in gods. With that out of the way, I can answer the rest. How do I deal with doubt? The same way I deal with everything else. I go back and rationally evaluate my options and decide which path is the best evidentially supported. When it comes to believing in gods, I find out if there's any evidence to support the existence of gods, and so long as the answer remains no, I don't believe it. Again, this is just an emotional position, not an intellectual one. I don't feel bad because I have no God beliefs, because my feelings don't mean anything. This is a question about truth and reality. Truth and reality require evidence. And there is no evidence. Therefore, I just don't believe these things. It really shouldn't be that hard to understand. What role do logic and reason play in your belief system? Now, we just talked about the whole belief system thing, so we're not going to do it again. As far as this question is concerned, quite a bit, as they should everyone's. You should care if the things in your head accurately comport with the real world. If you don't, then you've got some severe mental problems. People, of course, just don't like that, but this still remains the truth. You ought to constantly be challenging your beliefs and asking if they are still most likely true given the latest evidence that you have at hand. And I do that all the time. The religious do not. Given a choice between the two, I know which side I'm taking, and it sure the hell isn't yours. Has your atheism ever caused problems in your personal relationships? No. I mean, religion has, but never atheism. Way back when I deconverted, I had plenty of friends who were very strongly religious, all of whom, or most of whom at least, just stopped talking to me because I wasn't part of their cult anymore. It wasn't atheism that was the problem. It was religion. They chose to walk away, not me. I would have had no problem at all remaining friends with them. They chose otherwise. For anyone who values their religious beliefs over real people, good riddance to you. You have your priorities completely out of whack. You were never a friend if you're going to allow your imaginary friend in the sky to get in the way. Kind of sad, but it was their choice, not mine. So, there's your answer. Do you think there's anything unique about the human experience that atheists can enjoy and appreciate? I don't really know what you mean by unique, because I don't think people are special. I mean, sure, I've got an attachment to people because I'm kind of a people, but that doesn't mean from beyond any emotional perspective that humans really mean that much in the grand scheme of things. Let's change the question a little bit just so you can understand. Is there anything realistic, since I don't care about fantasy, that I cannot enjoy every bit as much as any theist? And the answer to that is no, of course not. None of the things that the religious claim to be worthwhile about their beliefs have any verifiable reality based on the evidence that we have. I get all the good parts and none of the bad parts. I'd say that puts me ahead. What do you think are the most common misconceptions about atheism? Well, let's be honest, you've managed to hit a lot of them. This is why most of these questions for atheist lists are just so ridiculous, because it's very clear that they don't even understand the basics. They don't know what atheism is. I mean, that is one of the things they're trying to find out, I guess. It was the first question after all, but honestly, they need to get that one straight in their heads before they go down any of these absurd rabbit holes of ridiculous ignorance. Most of the questions that have been asked would have gone away the second that they understood what atheism was. And this would have been a very short list, granted. Pretty much without exception, all of this is based on ignorance, because ignorance is what religion runs on. If they actually had any information and actually cared about the truth, most people wouldn't sign on to the religious belief system. What do you think the world would be like if more people were atheists? Much improved? No, I'm probably not that serious, because religion is only one problem that we face, and there's an awful lot of other things that are still going wrong that have absolutely nothing to do with magical wizards in the sky. It's why my channel tagline is about going after stupidity no matter where it hides. Religion is dumb, but there's an awful lot of things out there that are dumb, and all of them combine to cause tons of problems worldwide. I don't care if more people are atheists. I care if more people are rational, although granted, more rational people would probably mean more atheists by definition. I just value the rationality more. What role does science play in your belief system? Well, let's see. Science is how we rationally evaluate the real world. It's a mechanism by which we observe, test, and come to conclusions about what's actually going on. And I care what's actually going on. In fact, most of the time, that's really all that I care about. I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as I can. Plus, I want to know how to tell the difference between the two. So the actual mechanisms of science, how we determine the actual truth of reality, that's incredibly important. And that should be incredibly important to everyone. Granted, it doesn't determine everything, because science, like everything else, has its limits, but that's not what the question was about, was it? So, I guess I answered it. Let's move on. Do you think there's something special or sacred about humanity? No. No, I don't. Humanity isn't special, and sacred isn't even a thing. We're just animals on a planet full of animals. And that's something that hurts a lot of people's feelings, but so what? This is another case of coming to grips with the real world and not relying on your childish fifis. Because your fifis don't matter. Grow the hell up. What would have to happen for you to give up your atheist beliefs? All right, first off, I don't have any atheist beliefs. That is not how this works. Secondly, though, you'd have to demonstrate through objective, verifiable evidence that any gods actually exist. You know, you'd have to throw one up on the table for examination. Good luck on that. This is where they run into all of the problems. But don't you really want to believe in a god? No. No interest. At least, not unless you can show me verifiable evidence that said God exists. If there was evidence for a god, I would believe in a god. Probably wouldn't worship one, because most of the god concepts out there prove that their gods are complete assholes, but belief? Sure, I'd go where the evidence leads. I have no interest in the absence of evidence, though. I don't care. What's it going to take? Evidence. What form will that evidence have to take? I don't know. I'll know it when I see it. And I always laugh when they ask me, well, what would prove God to you? I don't know, but you don't have it, so what difference does it make? Nothing that I've ever been presented with convinces me at all. If that's all you got, then you're out of luck. That's not me being biased against your God. That's you having crap evidence. That doesn't make my requirements unreasonable. It just makes you gullible. And I'd say the same thing for any God or any idea. My standards for leprechauns are exactly the same as my standards for gods. Throw one up on the table for me to examine. If you can't, then you have absolutely no good reason to believe any of these things either. And that's not my problem. That's yours. So that's gotten pretty long. We're about halfway through the 56 questions. Therefore, next week we're going to do it all over again with another 28. So far, I will admit that other than having absolutely no clue what atheism is, and that really providing a lot of malformed, entirely ignorant takes on things, this hasn't been as bad as I thought it might be. At least we haven't gotten the standard gotcha nonsense that we run into so often. These are the kind of questions that I don't mind answering. It's too bad that the religious really don't care what our answers are, though. They won't change their perspective because they don't care what we say. I'm sure we've all seen that before. Somebody will say, well, being an atheist means that you hate God. No, you patiently correct them and explain what it actually means, and 5 minutes later they're going, well, being an atheist means you hate God. You just can't win because they're not actually interested in the truth. They only care about their own childish fifis, and I know I'm tired of that. How about you? Oh look, more questions. I love questions. Well, I love good questions, not the crap that we see so often from the religious, but these certainly seem to be genuine. What a surprise. So let's keep at it. Today, we're going to finish off that list of 56 questions that we started last week. There's a lot of them, but so far at least, I do think that they're pretty genuine. There are the standard problems where the religious have absolutely no grasp on the real world, but we'll address that when we come to it. For now, if you're amenable, let's get right back to the list where we left off last time. Do you reject all religions or just Christianity? Well, by definition, atheists reject all God claims, not just yours. This is just another indication that whoever wrote these questions, they don't have a clue. And I find that to be incredibly common. Well, you hate Christians because you're an atheist. Yeah, that's not how that works, is it? As though we embrace all the other religious traditions out there, we just hate yours. That is not how any of this works, but judging by the way these people think, if you can use that word, it's not very surprising. Do you believe in a higher power or a spiritual force? Nope. Unsupported beliefs are, by definition, unsupported, and I don't accept unsupported things. I expect there to be verifiable evidence, and when it comes to religion, there simply isn't any. I also apply that to things like Bigfoot, alien abductions, the Loch Ness Monster, and honest politicians. So far as we can tell, none of those things actually exist, and thus, none of those things should ever be accepted as true. Do you believe that morality is objective or subjective? Morality is entirely subjective. This becomes an emotional problem for a lot of people, even some atheists. Well, I want there to be a universal standard. Wah! Okay, too bad. What you want doesn't matter. What is actually real does. People who argue for objective moral standards always do so from a fallacious position. If there was an objective moral standard out there, then what we see in the real world, that isn't what we should see. It's why the religious just make up a bunch of bald rationalizations to explain away all the problems on their side. But man has an inherently sinful nature. That's why they're not all doing what we want them to do. Yeah, but prove that any of that is true. without looking in your big book of multiple choice. They can't. It's just laughably sad. What do you think about the fact that so many people throughout history have believed in God? I don't know. What do you think about the fact that so many people throughout history believed the earth was flat? People can be and demonstrably are wrong about a great many things. What's really being asserted here is a logical fallacy, the appeal to popularity. It doesn't matter how many people believe a thing. That doesn't make that thing true. We know that people are largely dumb. They always have been, and sadly, they probably always will be. That they embrace things that are not defensibly true for entirely emotional reasons, that doesn't mean anything, but that people have some big problems reasoning. It doesn't make any of those unevidenced claims so. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing? You know, I get really sick and tired of this one. Nobody says that. I mean, nobody except the religious. That is their entire shtick. Magic Man in the sky went poof and the universe was there. Science doesn't say any of that. There is no nothing in reality. Nothing can't even exist in reality. Nobody says this but you. Every time the religious yank this pathetic nugget out of their backsides, it just makes them look stupid. Stupider. They are projecting their own mythology onto others. Nobody says this but you morons. Rent a clue and stop looking dumb. Nuff said. How do you explain the existence of consciousness? Consciousness is an emergent property of the physical brain. How do we prove that? Well, if you mess with the brain, you change consciousness. Brain damage changes the individual's personality. When the brain stops working, the individual's consciousness simply ceases to exist. This is a no-brainer. See what I did there? Anyway, never mind. This is yet another case of what people want to be true, not jiving with what is demonstrably true. Lots of people really want to feel special. They want to believe that they're more than that 3-pound lump of meat in their head. But that's just not the case. This is it. This is you. That's all that you are. It's all you will ever be. Your feelings just don't matter. What do you believe? Well, I believe lots of things. None of it has anything at all to do with atheism, so I'm just not going to go into it. This is another problem that I tend to see a lot from the religious. They try to tie absolutely everything to their religion. Their faith colors absolutely everything else. People try to tie their politics to their religions. I've seen people tie their favorite colors to their religions. Lots of people are really uncomfortable unless they have a single overarching belief that controls everything else. It's just that reality doesn't actually work that way. Not that most of these people seem to care. Do you believe that science and religion are compatible? No, absolutely not. In fact, based on the way that both operate, they are directly incompatible. Science works by observation, testing, and repeated confirmation. Religion operates by taking what you want to be true and insisting that it is. Hebrews 11:1 spells it out perfectly. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is entirely incompatible with science. It's also entirely incompatible with reality, which science studies. Maybe you lunatics need to knock it off. What do you think is the most important thing to focus on in life? Life. I mean, really, just live the only life that you actually know that you have. If you waste it, then what are you going to have in the end? I know what you wish that you'd get, but that's not defensible in any way, shape, or form. It's just wishful thinking. That doesn't mean anything. Unfortunately, the religious are more concerned with their wishes and their dreams than they are with the demonstrable reality that they actually live in, which makes most of their desires entirely pointless. You get to decide what is important to you, not some silly book or imaginary man in the sky. Make a good choice. What do you think is the best way to live one's life? I don't know that there is a single answer to that question. I mean, live it the way that you want to, understanding that actions, as always, have consequences. So long as you're not hurting anyone else, I really don't care. And I mean demonstrably harming others. Magical thinking is always harmful to yourself and to those around you, which is why I oppose religion so strongly. If you can do good by others, great. If you can at least not do anything to harm them, that's fine too. If you run around making a pest of yourself and telling people lies, that's another thing entirely. The religious really ought to knock that one off. How do you respond to the argument that atheism is just another form of religion? It's stupid because it doesn't fit into any definition of the term religion at all. So let's look at a couple of examples. Religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or gods. Well, that certainly doesn't describe atheism at all, does it? Okay, how about this one? Religion is a particular system of faith and worship. Well, atheists have no faith and they sure don't worship anything, so that's 2 down. Even if you go with the least religious definition that I've been able to find, being pursuit or interest in which someone ascribes supreme importance, that doesn't even fit because I don't pursue atheism, and I certainly don't think it's important. If religion went away tomorrow and there were no more faithmongers in the world, I would never think about atheism ever again. It would be entirely irrelevant. So no, atheism isn't a religion. That's just a lie that the religious tell themselves so they can believe that everybody else is just like them. What do you think is the most convincing evidence for atheism? There is no evidence for atheism because atheism isn't a positive claim. I get so tired of having to explain this to these religious numbnuts. Atheism is, I don't believe you. That's it. Now, I had someone a couple of days ago say, well, I'm an atheist and I positively believe no gods exist. Don't try to erase me. Yeah, fuck off. You're doing intelligence wrong. This is not how any of this works. You cannot provide evidence against gods. Thus, having a positive position that gods do not exist is not rational. The moment that you have a positive position on anything, you incur a burden of proof to show that that position is true. I mean, you can certainly say that you have no good reason to believe that they exist. That's what I do. But the second that you take that positive position, you have the burden of proof to back it up. And these people can't do it. They can rationalize like we see the religious doing, but they can't really present any actual evidence. It just proves that atheists aren't necessarily smart, as sad as that is. What do you think is the most convincing evidence against atheism? Again, clearly you don't know what the hell you're talking about. The only possible evidence against atheism would be positive proof that any gods actually exist. And good luck coming up with that. The only way to prove atheism is wrong is to prove theism is right. That's what we've been asking of the religious forever, isn't it? Sadly, that proof has not been forthcoming. Wonder why. What do you think about the problem of evil? Well, it's a problem for the religious, but not as a lot of people seem to think. I figure that the problem of evil is more damning against the Christian claimed characteristics of God than against the actual existence of God, which, let's be honest, has never been justified in the first place. All of the omni properties are just arbitrarily attached, and that's where the problem arises. If God wasn't omnipotent or omnibenevolent, then the problem of evil would just go away. It's only because they insist, for no good defensible reason whatsoever, that God just has to have all these characteristics, that the problem of evil remains a weight around their necks. I just find it another reason why gods are so laughably absurd, and clearly just something that people made up. What do you think about the idea of a secular society? Personally, I like the idea. Now, granted, it's not going to solve all of the problems. I doubt that anything would. Dumb people are still going to be dumb, God beliefs or not. This isn't going to be a single solution to all the world's issues, but at least it's a good start before we get working on all the others. At least if people aren't voting for their imaginary friends and actively hating other people because it says so in an ancient book of mythology, I figure we're probably going to be off to a more positive start. Then we can try to get down to the real nitty-gritty. And that's why the subtitle on my channel is not exposing Christianity wherever it hides, it's exposing stupidity wherever it hides. Because you don't have to be religious to be stupid. Although, I guess it helps. Do you think religion is harmful to society? Why or why not? Yes, absolutely it is. All magical thinking is. Anything that encourages people to think in ways counter to rationality, evidence, and intellectualism is, at least potentially, hazardous to society at large, and that's exactly what religion does. Granted, some very liberal theists are probably fine, because I don't think they take their religious beliefs very seriously to begin with. They believe because somebody told them that they should. They believe because they think it makes them look good to the neighbors. But their religion is little more than an afterthought. Those aren't the people that are banging on your door and insisting that you join their church. Those aren't the people getting on TV and saying you have to do what they say, otherwise God is going to smite them. The liberals and the moderates are also the first people out the door when being religious stops being convenient. In fact, that's really what we're seeing today. Christianity is dying, and it's the liberal and the moderate Christians who are giving up the ghost, leaving behind all the real fanatics who are causing all the problems. This is just the last hurrah of fundamentalist Christianity that we're likely to ever see. Luckily, most of them are old and not long for this world. It's not going to last for that long, and I think that's a good thing. What do you think is the most important thing to teach children about atheism? Again, atheism isn't a thing. It's a lack of a thing. The only thing that we need to teach anybody about atheism is that not believing unsupported nonsense is okay. That's not really atheism, that's skepticism, and we do need to teach people how to be skeptical of unsupported garbage that people believe, only out of faith and fifis. Everyone ought to be skeptical, and not just about religion, but about everything. It's very clear that there are plenty of bad ideas, unsupported beliefs, and childish emotional nonsense that people buy into these days beyond the realm of religion. And all of that needs to go away. Every last bit of it. Now, for anybody who's read my blog for the last couple of months, you'll know that I've done a long, unofficial series of articles that show that the far-right political religious idiots and the far-left political idiots, they're both doing the exact same thing for the exact same reason. And you'll get a case of one side, and both of them do it, that will point to the other side and scream, well, they're just doing this. But if you look at it, they're also doing that for the same reasons. This has absolutely nothing at all to do with being right, because they're both equally wrong. And it takes a load of healthy skepticism to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, I see what you did there. And most people in the extremes can't do that. How do you deal with the feeling of being alone in your beliefs without a community of like-minded people to support you? Where did you get the idea that's true? Atheism is the fastest growing quasi-religious demographic out there. Of course, I have no idea when this questionnaire was written, so I can't really hold it too much against them. Honestly, this entire thing looks like someone who can't be bothered to do any basic research before they start asking questions. And we see that a lot, sadly. Not just in religion, but it certainly doesn't make this any better. I see it a lot online these days, people who have made no effort of any kind to learn about, well, anything. They're just using real live people online as their own personal Google because they're just lazy. And I get really, really tired of lazy people. You all ought to knock that off. But to get back to your question, how do I deal with feeling alone? I don't feel alone. And even if I was alone, I wouldn't care because I am self-sufficient. I don't need a whole bunch of stupid yes men running around telling me how great I am or how wonderful my beliefs are. It's sad that a lot of people do need that, but I'm not one of them. I don't need like-minded people to support me, at least not when it comes to atheism, because atheism isn't really a thing. I have a lot of other interests that have absolutely nothing to do with atheism, and the people that share those interests, they support me. And this is another problem, like I said earlier, about wrapping your entire life around a single overriding belief system, because that's just dumb. What do you think are the most pressing ethical issues facing humanity today? Well, I don't really think this is an atheist question. There are plenty, of course, but not that has anything directly to do with atheism. I think the complete lack of any honesty out there is a big one, especially when it comes to politics. People are just willing to lie to your face if they think it might get them votes or money or support. And, of course, going back to the last question, people are just too stupid to check out the claims being made, and they just sign on the dotted line based entirely on how the claims feel. Not whether they're true, not whether they've been checked out, because nobody actually cares about any of that, but if it gives them a dopamine hit in the head. And I suppose religion has been doing that forever too. Like I said way back when, somewhere in this list of questions, I don't really remember where, just being an atheist doesn't make you a skeptic. It doesn't make you intelligent. It doesn't make you rational. It's not the atheism that really matters. The atheism grows out of the skepticism. It's the skepticism that actually gets you there. Do you think atheists should actively advocate for atheism? Well, I think people should openly and actively advocate for rationality. People should be skeptics. Atheism is just the logical outcome of exercising that skepticism in the religious sphere. Of course, it seems obvious that whoever the hell wrote these questions had no idea what any of these words actually meant, so I guess you can probably take that how you want. What do you think are the main obstacles to atheism being more widely accepted? See my above answer. It's already being widely accepted. In another couple of decades, we'll be asking that about religion. According to Pew Research, by 2070, Christianity will likely be in the minority and atheism will be in the majority. And I don't even know that it's going to take that long. And I say that as somebody who is absolutely amazed at the advances that atheism has made. Back in 2007, it looked like it was going to take forever. Now, it looks like it's going to happen tomorrow. Now, religion is in a tailspin. Churches are closing in droves. Church attendance dropped below 50%, and it's still falling. Barna actually did a research project very recently, I think it was this year, where they found that only 68% of people interviewed claimed to be Christian. Only about 38% of people, I'm just going by memory on these numbers, so don't sue me, but only about 38% of people actually attended church, and only about 33% actually read the Bible. So religion ain't doing so hot, people. It's not that hard to see. Where I live now, there are only 3 actual physical standalone Christian churches within a reasonable driving distance. That's it. Just 3. There's a couple more in strip malls, but that's a far cry from them being on every street corner like they were in the place I used to live. But I noted back then that those were going out of business like crazy. These things are dying. I can't tell you the last time that I ran into anyone openly preaching on the street. I mean, it's been years and years and years, and I live in a very conservative area. Nobody talks about religion. Nobody goes door to door. It's just dead. And that's a great thing. Do you think that atheism will eventually become the dominant worldview? You're not keeping up, are you? Now, granted, as I said, I don't know when this was made, but as of today, 2023, yeah, you're way out of date. In a lot of places around the world, it already is the dominant worldview. Pew Research estimates that if things continue as they have been in the US by 2070, non-religion will have surpassed religion in terms of popularity. If you look at 2017 Gallup polling, Australia is already 63% non-religious. Austria is 53%. Azerbaijan is 64%. Belgium, also 64%. Canada, 57%. China, 90%. The Czech Republic, 72%. Denmark, 61%. Estonia, 60%. Finland, 55%. Germany, 60%. Ireland, 56%. Israel, and I think this is kind of surprising, 58% secular. Japan, 60%. Norway, 62%. Slovenia, 53%. South Korea, 60%. Spain, 57%. Sweden, 73%. The UK, 69%. And Vietnam, 63%. That's a whole lot of places that don't have a whole lot of use for religion, isn't it? The US is rapidly catching up. We were at 39% back in 2017, and we're certainly a hell of a lot higher than that now. Most of the places where religion is still in the majority, those places tend to be third world and developing countries, and as they develop, they're going to leave religion behind too. It really is a great time to be alive, isn't it? What do you think is the most important thing atheists can do to improve their public image? Who cares? This isn't a popularity contest. Do you think we're trying to impress the religiously delusional? If so, we shouldn't be. We should just be the best people that we can be. We should be the most rational people we should be. And we shouldn't believe stupid shit. Again, this is about skepticism, not falling for the mindless garbage that so many people fall for. It's not about making other people happy. It's not about stroking their childish egos. It's about making all of humanity smarter. And I think that's a pretty good goal. What do you think is the best way to argue with someone religious? Well, normally I would say with the facts. Sadly, though, most religious people just don't care. You're probably pretty safe with the barely religious, the liberal and moderate theists, because that's what the things like street epistemology will work on. Those are the people who are willing to honestly question their own preconceptions and are more likely to change their minds when they realize that they're wrong. For the fundamentalist, though, it's pretty much a lost cause. I was just having this discussion with an atheist who thought that you could just go after fundamentalists and change their minds. After all, some fundamentalists have lost their faith before, so it's got to be possible. Yeah, sorry, it's not. You can't change anyone else's mind against their will. They could decide on their own that they cared more about the facts than about their faith. I mean, I did that myself. But for as much as I was ever a real fundamentalist, that has to come from within. It can't be imposed from the outside. You can't logically argue someone out of a position that they never logically argued themselves into in the first place. I mean, if you want to go and do that, you're perfectly welcome to do so, but I wouldn't be getting my hopes up of being very successful. It's kind of like the stands against reason people. They make a lot of excuses for why they fail, because they're almost always going to fail. These are not rational people. These are fanatics, and fanatics are almost impossible to deconvert through reason. Is there anything else you'd like to add about atheism or your experiences as an atheist? Not really. I mean, I guess if this was a real face-to-face discussion, then yeah, maybe, but this isn't. This is just on a website. It's just some guy online answering a bunch of questions. So from here on down, this is probably going to be pretty quick because most of it is conversational and it really just doesn't apply to what we're doing here. So let's kind of wrap this up. What should I do if I want to learn more about atheism? Well, there's nothing to learn about atheism because, as I keep saying, atheism isn't a thing. It's a lack of a thing. We just don't believe your entirely unsupported claims. I mean, there are a bunch of books about the subject if you really want to go read them, but most of them are just criticizing religion, not explaining atheism, because, as I said, there's really nothing to explain. The concept is very, very simple. We just don't believe you. Can you recommend any good books or resources on atheism? I think I just addressed that, didn't I? So instead of just skipping the question or whatever, I wanted to take this opportunity to say that I see an awful lot of people out there, atheist channels on YouTube and the like, that are really giving religion too much rope. I was thinking about this earlier today after I watched a video that addressed biblical claims as if the Bible was actually worthwhile. Now, of course, any content creator can do whatever they want to do. I'm not being critical of that. But many, maybe even most, YouTube atheist channels simply grant all of the initial preconceptions of the religious. There is a God. The Bible is the word of that God. They are only addressing how people interpret the Bible, things like that. Well, who cares about that? For me, the entire question about religion begins and ends with the existence of their gods. If you can't prove that, then nothing else matters. Discussion over because you haven't managed to get to step one. What's the point of talking about a book of ancient mythology if you haven't established the God that it discusses in the first place? I just don't get it. I figure they're just looking to increase their chances for engagement, but debating the Bible without proving God is like debating the truth of Star Trek canon without establishing that Captain Kirk exists. You need to start at square one, and the religious refuse to do that. Do you have any questions for me about my beliefs? No, because you're not here. What difference would it make? It's not like you can answer me. This is, as a lot of other questionnaires that we've seen online, intended for believers to have a face-to-face interaction with an atheist. And as such, I do understand the limitations of this format and acknowledge that some of these questions are less than useful doing it as we are. If you were here, then my questions would be on you proving your God was real, something that I think we all know wouldn't go anywhere. So I don't see the point in pursuing it at all. So there we go. That's 56 questions down. And to be honest, I do think some of them were interesting. A lot were based on a very poor understanding of reality, which I figure a lot of us have come to expect. Why these people can't just do a simple Google search, I just don't know. But I think that is pretty par for the course. What do you all think about this? Let me know in the comments. I honestly do like doing question videos, so long as the questions aren't painfully stupid and ignorant, which sadly I think we all know a lot of them are. It's really hard to find questions that aren't really intended for an already religious audience, where they're just saying, well, here's a question for an atheist. Fill in your own answer. Yeah, that's really, really common. We run into that a lot. They don't care if atheists answer or if atheists even see the questions. They exist solely so their religious audience can fill in all the gaps with made-up answers, and they can all get a good laugh over the things they just invented in their heads. I don't really get that impression from this list, which I think is good. These aren't gotcha questions. They weren't overtly trying to put one over on atheists like things from Braxton Hunter or Matt Slick or people like that clearly do. If my answers help somebody, I'm glad. That's what I'm here to do after all. So if you have any additional questions for me, go ahead and post them down in the comments and I'll give them a look. That's kind of what we do around here after all. We have conversations. Sadly, the religious aren't very good at that. So until next time, take care and be rational. Somebody out there has to be.